Sabrina 70s comic, issue 68. After Harvey happily takes Sabrina home from a date, the next day he doesn't want to do it again and calls her a kid. Then he just outright tells her that he's found another love, because when he picked up a book to return it to her, their fingers touched and he heard bells. Sabrina doesn't immediately say that this was a school bell, and thinks that hearing bells around a lover only happens in romance novels. And she follows him and assumes that the woman he's fawning over is that same girl, which is not really a safe assumption at this point. They act overly romantic and hug each other, and she says that she can hear bells ring. Then it turns out that she's got some anklet that has bells on it. So she's desperate to have a boyfriend. She acts shy about kissing him at first, but then says it'd be fun to try anyways. Does she want a boyfriend or not? So Sabrina casts a spell to summon a giant bell between them. This ends with Harvey being tired of her while she's terrified of him, saying, "Those lips should be registered as a deadly weapon." Too bad the story ends there instead of with Harvey begging for Sabrina to take him back. In the comedy page, Sabrina's asked to try a free sample of a new candy bar at a street corner. It tastes awful, and she sees that it's got nothing but artificial ingredients. And the story ends with her asking if she has an artificial stomach ache. In the next story, Ambrose is in love again, and Hilda's back to being snarky about it instead of happy like she was about Matilda. This is probably for the same reason I'm snarky about it. The comic would never let him stay with the girl for more than one story. And it would be understandable if it was because the reckless use of magic scared her off, but that's never why they leave him, and even then, he could just erase her memory. She hugs him and says that she can't stand to be away from him. She calls him gorgeous, and Hilda and Sabrina doubt that and think she has bad eyesight. Why aren't the two of them mad at them for saying that? They aren't that far away from each other. They don't know what she sees in him, and already Hilda gets suspicious and decides to call Della. I was suspicious right away because all the woman was talking about was that she missed them and she hugs him right away. But that doesn't guarantee magic's involved. It could mean she's just really desperate and lonely. Or she's a con artist in it for the money, or she could be under a love spell, and he took forever to try to use one because he was opposed to them, unlike Sabrina. Still, it seems ridiculous to me that she's outright calling the head witch about this right away when she's barely said anything to Ambrose. Of course they don't know what she sees in him, but they'd know if they just asked her, or waited. Or maybe she has different taste. How often do people bother Della about this? Also, I checked to see what this woman's name was, and the story didn't tell me. So Hilda interferes with Ambrose's business and happiness to summon Della to undo his spell, which made Ambrose look handsome to her. Della says that he can't keep the spell going forever, and she'd just hate him if she found out what he really looked like. Why didn't he just use a regular love spell? How was I supposed to know that Ambrose looked terrible most of the time? In-universe. This plot point comes out of nowhere. The story ends with Ambrose being made to hate her because she's made to look ugly all of a sudden, and he undoes the spell, and thinks he should get his eyes checked. I'm pretty sure he knows she was the victim of a spell. She was just as close to him earlier. The ending wouldn't annoy me if we got to see the relationship progress naturally. Della and Sabrina even said that it wouldn't have lasted anyways. Maybe because she'd see what he looks like in a mirror or photo. You'd think Della would have either been too busy or had no problem with it at all, because he'd be messing with a mortal. But it was merciful of her to make the breakup easy on Ambrose by making her look ugly. She could have easily just removed the spell on Ambrose. That's what I expected. It would have been dark and uncomfortable to keep things going. Ambrose didn't deserve her. It's not like he made her do his chores. Sabrina's forced people to do more humiliating things, like paint people with white paint at a sports game. In the next story, Sabrina's happy about spring where everyone she's passing by is in love. Yeah, for now. She thinks Hilda isn't too old for romance, since 200 years old isn't very old for a witch. Then why is she called old lady all the time? How does the aging work? Wasn't I told that she was over 600 years old? Or over 400? There was even a cover that had someone say that you have to be under 200 years old to be wearing outfits that young women wear. So because she wants to make her happy, which is at least a good intention, she decides to pin a special love charm on Hilda. which gets every guy who sees her interested because Sabrina's an idiot who didn't think things through. It shouldn't take much thought to think one guy at a time for that spell. The gardener with the hose calls Hilda beautiful and kisses her cheek, and accidentally sprays Sabrina with the hose. Then as he's offering to sail away with her to a far-off island, the mailman falls for her too, and the two of them grab her arms and she calls for help, instead of just magicking them away with a wish. Sabrina somehow expects the officer to help when he's a man too. Couldn't Sabrina have altered the love charm the second the mailman bothered her? Instead, she has to take the pin off herself. Hilda's probably used to being called an old hag at this point, since she doesn't abuse her magic on them after that. They think they need their heads checked, and I hope Hilda's being sarcastic when she wonders what came over those guys. It should be obvious. Ambrose then goes to Sabrina for advice on how to hex a very bad enemy of his. His dialogue was stilted there, but not everyone's very eloquent at speaking. Anyways, Sabrina has a reputation as a goody two-shoes in her family, because she doesn't tell them about her own magic abuse, so it's surprising that Ambrose went to her for advice. So the story ends with Sabrina giving the love charm to him, and telling him to put it on his enemy. He's just puzzled, and we don't know if she explained herself properly after that. Logically, she would have said more than that. It would have been annoying if I actually saw Ambrose's enemy and saw what a jerk he was, but it would have made Ambrose look sympathetic here. And when did he meet this enemy? I barely ever see him out of the house. I think he has a social life in the other realm. Where else is he meeting all these people? But we should be told about that. In the comedy page, we see Sabrina make herself half invisible. Why? Anyways, in the next story, Hilda's dumbfounded that Sabrina would want to do a dumb mortal thing like jogging. Somehow, jogging makes Sabrina feel good. I guess she doesn't start gasping and wheezing after running a block. She fails to explain herself to Hilda. And out of complete nowhere, Hilda decides it's a good idea to join her because she's feeling sluggish. So is this more of her character development, where she's more open-minded? Like in the 90s comic, Hilda hates jogging, and a paper hits her in the face, meaning that she can't see. Someone behind a cart tells her to look out, and then he crashes it into a tree, and yells at her, blaming her for it. And I thought he was a nice guy. At least Hilda fixes it. He naturally asks how she did that. I guess he had to forget this afterwards. Then Hilda trips over a kid because she was looking back at him and knocks over his ice cream. Surprisingly, instead of being mean to him for yelling at her, she magically gives him another ice cream sundae, making magic obvious once again. But this makes sense because she has a soft side for children, as we've seen before. Maybe this is going to lead to a heartwarming ending where Hilda realizes that she likes jogging because mishaps gave her an excuse to do good deeds. Good thing Della won't bitch her at her, right? But that won't be a funny ending, so we can't have that. Hilda steps on his skateboard by accident and makes someone flip over, and she heads for a car. So she makes the car float and falls into wet cement. The story ends with her complaining that jogging sucks because she's all zapped out, after she uses magic to fix the wet cement. In the first story, the first page is just the cruel hope spot before Harvey goes crazy over another girl again. And surprisingly, it's because she uses an anklet with bells on it to make him think that she's the one, because a guy like him is familiar with corny romance novels, and somehow doesn't immediately figure out what's going on. So Sabrina uses magic to get him back. The second story is also about a relationship, as Ambrose abuses magic to make himself look handsome to a woman he liked. Then Hilda interferes and summons Della on him because she called Ambrose gorgeous, and Della undoes the spell, making her hate him because she's shallow. At least she makes it easier on him by making him think she's ugly. The third story is about infatuation as well, as right after seeing Ambrose get a girl by trickery and being opposed to it, Sabrina uses a love charm to make all the guys love Hilda. That was stupid of her. Not only because she should have known to restrict it to only one guy, but also because there was no guarantee that Hilda would love that guy, even if she is desperate. The final story is about Hilda not only getting tired by jogging, but also by getting into a ton of accidents. And surprisingly, she's nice enough to undo all of them, even though she'd hardly be in the mood. I guess Sabrina's good influence finally started rubbing off on her, but what took so long? This is another story that should have been Zelda instead of Hilda. And by the end, she's exhausted from all the magic, which is a bit more realistic than her just being happy, especially since she wasn't just doing good deeds, she was undoing the mistakes she made.